Hi, I'm Rainer and welcome to my train room. Been a couple of weeks or more since I put out a video because I haven't been here. I've been away up north and anyway, got back and today it looks like it's going to be a rainy day outside. So I thought I would start doing something in here again. And back to this kind of end of my rail yard right here. And if you've seen some of my older videos, I've done some ballasting back here. I recently did this backdrop and this fence back here. And I've got the main line that kind of comes through here ballasted. This track right here is ballasted, but this one leads around the back of, there's going to be more buildings coming in here for my paper mill complex eventually. So this track might need to move a little bit still, so I haven't ballasted it. And then there's this track right here in the yard, which is going to be kind of my maintenance crew track. I've got a car of wheels sitting here and another gone, and just a flat car sitting here. But I've got some cranes to build and things like that. So I'm kind of seeing this track as a track for the maintenance crew to use. But what I wanted to do is try to fit a building into this gap here before I do the ballasting and before I do the other ground cover to make sure it fits. So some time ago, I picked up this kit online. It's a Kibri kit. It's like a little factory little loading dock and a crane on the outside of it, on the front of it. And I think that this building will fit in this gap, but I don't exactly know how it's all going to work out. And I might need to move that track a little bit or do some small changes or small adjustments in the track. So what I'm hoping to do is get this kit, start building it here today. I know it's going to take, 2 or 3 days to get it done, because of all the gluing and the painting and drying times and things like that. But I'll show you how I do it. I've now built a number of these Kibri kits, and I know it's more of a European style building, but that's okay. I like these old brick buildings. I like the look of them. I've got this as a Kibri kit, and the one behind it is a Walters kit. I think they work together okay as long as you paint them appropriately. And so I'm just thinking this will be a nice little building to try to fit into this gap, and we'll see how it works out. I'm hoping that it will fit in there and I don't have to make too many adjustments. I mean, the rear tracks back here that's where they're going to stay. They're all functioning, but if I have to move this siding a little bit or make some adjustments to it, that's okay. So I'm going to see how this fits, get this built, and show you how I end up doing it. So with that, let's get over to the workbench and start working on it. So I have the kit here on my workbench, and just to kind of show you again before I open the box, it's just a brick building. It has some tanks and a little crane out here and an accessory, kind of a little extension to the building over here. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to end up building this, if it's going to look exactly the same or what I'm going to end up doing with it. But one thing I do like about these Kibri kits is they seem to have a lot of little detailed parts in them, at least the ones I've built in the past. And they seem to be pretty nice kits. So I am going to open this up and see what we have here. I did take a look at it before to get an idea with the bases to see if it would fit in that gap, and I think it will. It's going to be close. It's going to be pretty tight, and I might have to modify how they build the building, but I think it will fit. So here's the instructions, and being a German kit, they have most of the drawings, most of the instructions are just pictures with numbers, and there's very little writing. There are some instructions in there in writing how to do them, but overall I found that they're not too bad to follow. So at this point, I'm just going to slowly pull everything out. These are obviously window glass for various parts of the building. And these are window frames. Go with the window glass. This is a roof panel for something. Looks like a fairly involved kit because there are a lot of parts in here. So it's just a matter of slowly working my way through. These little bins that you can pick up with a forklift, Already received a few of those in some other Kibri kits. It looks like they're a common part, a detail part that they throw into all of the kits. So let's pull out the brick wall sections, because that's, you know, obviously what I'm going to be starting with is building the walls and seeing where it goes from there. It's another section of roof panels. I'm going to put all of the roof sections over here. These are some more, I'm assuming some type of detail parts. I don't know what. This looks like a little bag of chain, probably for the crane out in front. These look like they're more window, door. No, these are probably the wall sections for that little addition building. So I'm just going to put those there for now. More detail parts. Like I said, these things have a lot of detail parts in them. These are all the window frames for the main part of the building. So, and what they often include is these types of things as well, which are blank out panels that you can often put sometimes wherever you want, instead of windows, to blank out a window with bricks, like they would have done in factories back then, build a whole building and then realize that they don't want a window there. So we've got tanks and detail parts, some black paper here. So what I'm trying to do here first is pull out all of the parts that I see that are specifically brick, because I'm going to be starting to assemble the brick walls. They will need to be primed and painted, and that takes some time, so I'm just going to start with those to begin with. I can't do everything all at once, and there's just way too many parts to keep track of otherwise. And again, these are some more skids or pallets. They come as detail parts. I have some of these from some other kits as well. Like I said, these kits have a lot of cool little detail parts, whether you use them or not. So I think my plan for this building at this point will be to assemble the walls. So I will glue the walls to the base, glue the walls together. And the same thing with things like these. I'm assuming these are, I'll have to look at what these are. These may be corner pieces, or they could be a chimney. But a lot of these parts, I'm just going to kind of glue them together. And once they're glued together, I'm going to prime all of the walls inside and out with some flat black paint. And that gives me a good primer for the way I end up painting the brick. You've probably seen this in my other videos if you've watched this channel for a while. But I'll be doing the same thing with this. But the black paint also has the additional feature of being able to help block some of the light transmission through the walls, because I do want to illuminate the inside of this building. And the problem with plastic, even darker plastic like this, is if you have a light source, a point light source like an LED inside, and you turn it on, it can tend to make these walls glow kind of a reddish color, and that doesn't look very realistic. So I want to just blank it out with black paint inside and out once they're glued together, and then start my actual painting of the walls. And with walls like this especially, it makes sense to paint them, to glue them first and then paint them, because I end up using MEK as it's a solvent cement, so it basically dissolves the two pieces of similar plastic together into one unit. And if there's paint on that surface, it doesn't end up working very well. And also, if you paint the walls first and then try to glue it together, in the gluing process, you can mess up some of your paint work. So I found with these kinds of things, glue the main wall sections together, prime them, then paint them, and then work on all of the other details. Now, things like the window frames, I will paint before I glue them in, because it's just too difficult to paint them accurately without getting extra paint on the brick. But the main brick sections that are all going to be painted the same way, makes sense to glue them first, then paint them. So I have my 4 wall sections here, and it appears that these two are, from everything I can see, basically identical. what do they have? Yeah, the number on the back is just the same, so W309. So those will go on the ends here. And then this will be the back wall with a loading dock. And this is the other wall with the man door here, and you can tell where the step is in the base, so that goes in here. Now, what I noticed was this wall is missing the top of this brick thing, so I dug through the box and I found the missing piece, so it appears to have broken off of here. So what I'm going to try to do is, once I glue the rest of the walls together, I should be able to glue this into place because it will be matching up with another column. So shouldn't be a big deal. Just had to look through the box to find that little missing piece. And these 4 pieces here, they will go on after the roof is attached and they finish up these top little columns. So for now, I just need to paint them so that they match the rest of the building, but I can't attach them yet because I won't be able to get the roof in place. Now, for the glue, what I'm using is some of this MEK. It's just a clear solvent, and I put it on with a little syringe. And these syringes, I just bought a pack of them, disposable syringes. I bought them on Amazon. They work for a while. And just be careful with this stuff. I've spilled it before, and that's why I have no yellow lines here, because it kind of dissolves everything, but that is how it works. So what I'll first do is start with just this front wall, position it carefully lengthwise to try to line it up. I'll try to line up the doorway, and then just dribble a couple drops of this stuff, and it wicks into the joint. And that should be all it takes. Don't need to hold it for a long time because it evaporates. It's very thin and it evaporates very quickly. And you do have a little bit of a ability to reposition for the first little bit because it's not completely hard. If you think of it, it's melting the plastic, and then as the plastic is hardening up, it becomes harder. So when the plastic is still soft in there, you can reposition things if you get them off a little bit. So now I will do one of the end walls. Same kind of deal. Get it positioned as snugly as I can. So although this doesn't really glue your finger to it like super glue would, you still need to be careful because if it leaks through the joint and in between your finger and the plastic, it does melt the plastic or dissolve the plastic, and then your finger can end up deforming the outside and marking up the outside of the plastic. So you want to make sure that it's not seeping through and doing that. Here I just put it down the joint. Just go like this to squeeze it, but again, try not to put my finger right on the joint. Now we can do the same thing with the rear wall. So I glued the bottom in. I'm just waiting for it to kind of grab a little bit, start to solidify. I didn't dribble anything down the vertical joint because I have my finger jammed against that corner and I don't want it to mess it up. Just put it down here and it just kind of runs down the corner and wicks in. I'll try to get some more into my syringe. This bottle's getting low, so it's kind of sucking bubbles out of there, and you know. I'm just pushing the bottom in because I want a nice tight fit down at the bottom of the wall. Just hold this for a little bit until I know that, I just kind of look at it and to see that the kind of the shininess of the the liquid is disappearing, then I know that most of the liquid is evaporated and it will be starting to set up. Then we'll get the last corner glued together. Same deal. Just kind of just put my finger through the window and door holes and kind of squeeze the corner together. So the walls are glued to the base now, all 4 of them. I'm just going to let this solvent evaporate the rest of the way, and then I can prime them. Oh, right, and I got to attach this missing top corner. So let's see what we can do here. Trying to get the brick lines lined up. It looks okay like that. Now once I paint it, I think the joint will become completely invisible. So that looks okay for now. What I'm going to do is now just like I mentioned, I'm going to let this glue dry the rest of the way, all of the solvent evaporate, and make sure it's hardened up before I get paint in there, because I don't want the paint to do anything weird with the solvent. And just make sure that I have any little specks, dust, or things like that cleaned off of it. Just wipe it off, and I'll give it a good coat of flat black primer. And then I will be back. I'll do that in the spray booth, and then I'll be back here to paint with some acrylic paints. So I have all the brick portions primed black, sprayed some black on the inside as well as on the outside. So that's for the 4 main walls as well as these other parts. I also painted all of the window frames and the 2 doors for this building with some red paint. It's actually the same red that I used on one of the other, on my railroad shop building over there. So I figure the 2 buildings being painted with the windows kind of the same color for the same rail yard kind of fits together and makes them, you know, maybe look like they belong together, even though they're slightly different designs of buildings. Next step here is to paint these brick walls. I'm just going to move some things out of the way. And generally what I do is I end up painting them with just these acrylic paints, and I'll put a little bit of this red oxide because it works well for a brick color, but I kind of want to make it look a little bit different color than some of the other ones. So I'm thinking of just darkening it up a little bit. I'll put a little bit of burnt umber in here and just see how that mix ends up looking. And just show you what I end up doing. So I'm going to start on this. This is actually going to be the back wall that's facing away from the front of the layout, because the track that I was talking about at the beginning of the video is going to be running in front of here with the loading dock. So this is the side. You're mostly going to see this side and a little bit of this side when you look at it. You might be able to see this end, but this side of the building is going to be basically facing toward the backdrop of the layout. So I'll start there just to test my colors. And what I do is I get some of the paint on a flat brush like this, and not too much, and then I just start by brushing it on here lightly. And it doesn't need to be an even covering all the way across. And what I'm doing, if you notice, is that I'm just kind of brushing it on, but not pushing very hard to hold the brush fairly flat so that it doesn't actually end up brushing it into the mortar joints too much, so it leaves the mortar joints a little bit darker. So the idea is to just kind of give it a quick coating of paint here. And if you'll notice, I'm not really worried about pushing it into the top corners in these little alcoves at the top either, because that actually makes it look even more like dirty shadows and things like that. So it kind of works for making it look weathered without even doing any weathering on it. And a little bit uneven paint is okay because it's supposed to look kind of like dirty brick that has, you know, different amounts of dirt on it, things like that. So it doesn't need to be even. I find that painting the buildings like this is pretty forgiving. If you get a little too much paint, you just kind of brush it out, and it all seems to work out at the end. That's probably enough for that building. Hopefully it shows up okay in this camera, but just gives me a coating of the brick color, but the black is still showing through in a lot of places. I think once it dries and is even more of a flat color, it'll give me more of that look. And that should do it for the walls. I just want kind of this blotchy reddish brick with a lot of black because I want it to look like old dirty brick. So I think that should do it for the main walls. Fairly easy to paint like that. Now I need to do all these other brick panels to have the same look because they're going to be part of the same building. That should do it. Building has a coat of paint for the bricks. I'm going to do some weathering because I want this to look like one of the less maintained or less clean buildings in the railroad yard. So kind of this blotchy brick pattern is good, and then I can do some more weathering on it once I do some more of get more of the building completed. But for now, I'm happy with this. I will leave this acrylic paint to dry overnight, and then I will move on to the next step. So it's now the next morning, and this paint is all dry. Paint on the red things is dry. The only thing that's not probably totally dry is that, because I just painted that with some acrylic paint just a few minutes ago because, well, I forgot to do it yesterday. So at this point, I'm going to start putting the windows or the window frames and these blanking brick panels in. And according to the instructions, what they tell you to do is, well, in the front wall, they tell you to put in these 3 windows at the window frames at the top, these half blanked ones at the bottom, which makes sense in this door. On this end, it tells you to put the 3 regular window frames in here and then these blanking panels down at the bottom, which again makes sense because there's some tanks and things go on this end. So that's totally fine. On the back wall, it actually shows to put window frames in all of these. So these double ones down here, the single one here, and then regular window frames across the top and the door in here. But I'm going to put brick panels at the top here, and I'll tell you why in a second. Then this far end, according to the instructions, shows you putting in windows at the top and nothing in the bottom, because this is where that extension addition building is supposed to go. And I was looking at where it goes on the layout, and I've decided to just put in just this building and not build the extension. Maybe I'll use it somewhere else on the layout, but the construction of that building doesn't have the look that I want. It just has these large windows, and I can't see them. I can't see that being in the rail yard the way I'm imagining it, so I'm not going to use it there. I'll probably use it somewhere else. But fortunately, these kits have enough windows in them that there's even 4 that I won't be using, if my math is correct, to be able to put windows in all of the openings on this end. The reason I want to put the brick panels, and again, there's extra brick panels, so again, if my math is correct. And the reason I want to put the brick up here is this side of the building is going to be facing the backdrop of the layout, and it's only going to be a few inches, this far from the back of the layout. And one of the things I don't want to have happening is when I turn the lights on in this building and turn the other lights off, I don't want these windows to be casting, window-shaped light patterns on my backdrop that's supposed to be, a forested lake scene. And that's one of the things to watch out for when you have windows that are and buildings that are illuminated. It's fine if they're casting the light on the ground like they normally would, but if you have a backdrop that's simulating a background in the distance and the windows are casting light onto that backdrop, that really ruins the realism, especially in photos and video and stuff. So that's why I'm planning, at least on these top windows, the bottom ones are going to be closer to kind of a fence and some closer shrubs, so that's not too bad. But these upper windows, I kind of want to block them off anyway, so just putting these brick fillers in, I think will do a good job. Anyway, I'm going to start with working on the front wall, and you may not be able to see everything in the video because of the angle that I'm working at, unfortunately, but it's pretty self-explanatory, and I'm not going to make you watch all of it in real time because it's just going to take too long. Generally, what I do, though, is I take these things like these door frames, position them in place. So obviously, positioning all of this would have been easier to do if I did it when the walls were still apart. However, as I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to glue the walls together, get them all painted so that that paint doesn't get disturbed in the gluing process, and then pre-paint these and put them in because it's easier to do the painting part. But it does mean that it's a little bit trickier because I'm working inside a sort of completed building. Now for glue, I won't be using the same thing that I used earlier, simply because I am now gluing pieces that have some paint on the surfaces, and trying to remove that paint is a very slow process, and I don't want to mess that up. So what I'm going to be using is some super glue, and this glue that I use is, I've had a few people ask in the comments about it, these bottles with the long skinny spouts. It's just something I found on Amazon, and this stuff's a medium viscosity. It's a brand called Fixed. And it seems to work pretty well. It comes with these big, long, skinny spouts. I have some of that, and I also have some thick viscosity stuff here as well. But I'm going to be using the medium right now. And what I like about these spouts is, first of all, it's really easy to get the glue in where you want it because it's long and narrow. But the second thing is that you don't actually have to cap the bottle when you're not using it. Just set it up right somewhere, and whatever glue is in there dribbles out back into the bottle. And because that tube is so thin inside, there's very little air exchange going into the bottle, so it doesn't actually harden up in the bottle. So it's really kind of easy to use because I just use it and then just stand it up in my rack here behind me, and I can leave it for a few weeks and come back and it's still ready to go. So that's what I've been using, and seems to work well for me. And being super glue, it does start to set up pretty quickly. I just put a very small amount because you don't want it bleeding into everywhere. Now these windows do have these little tabs sticking out, and there's little pins or bumps on the molded walls to help you center the windows. They do get centered pretty easily once you put them into place, and then I just put a small drop of glue around each one of those posts, and that should be enough to hold them in place. Now on this end wall, one of the things to check in the instructions when you're doing it is it does have one window that's slightly different than the others, and this one has a little round hole, and that's because it has a vent pipe coming up, and it goes in, I'm going to have to check the instructions again, but I believe it goes in this front corner wall, upper front window opening, because there's going to be a pipe coming out of it. So, you could put regular windows in there, into all of them, they would fit and it would look good. But if you want to do the vent pipe as the kit is built, you need to put this one window is different than the rest just because it has that hole for the vent, and it goes in this upper window. So this is what it looks like with the window frames and the doors in the front. Now I need to just keep going around the building and do the rest of it. So I think I'm going to start on this wall right here, do the windows, this pile right here, put those in, move to the back wall, and then I'll do this one. This one, because it's got this protrusion sticking out, I'll have to put it on a block or something because, it's going to be a little weird to hold it flat. So I'm not going to force you to watch all of that. I'm just going to continue gluing through these, and then I'll be back to you with the end result. So I got all of the window frames and the brick blanking panels are in. So this is what I meant about the back wall. This is the little door, the double window, this little window. They still need to have the clear glass on the inside. But the top windows, I put these brick blanking panels in just to block them so light doesn't come out and hit the backdrop. So this end I've done just according to the instructions, put the brick blank panels up here, put the regular windows in the end. The far end, it didn't show putting window frames in at all because it was going to be covered up by that other building, but I'm not going to use that other building, so I put those in. And then the one window frame here is different than the others because it has this round hole for a vent pipe, and that's where, according to the instructions, it's supposed to go. Now, at the beginning of this, when I started putting the window frames in the front wall, I made a mistake because I showed you that piece that I had recently painted, and then I totally forgot about putting that in. So I put in all the windows and then realized I had to pop one out. Fortunately, it hadn't been in there very long, so it came out fairly easily. Because the idea is that you're supposed to have all these windows in, but this one window actually is blocked by this board panel, because then there is a beam that comes out here with a hoist for lifting things in and out of your train cars and onto the loading dock or wherever you might want to put it. So I had to pop the window out and glued that in. So that part is now done. And I can start putting the window glass in. Again, it'll be the same kind of thing. Just position the glass on the inside and just give them a tiny little drop of glue to make them stick to the window frames. Now, I'm going to try it at least on the back wall to see how it works with the MEK because it is clear styrene for the windows, and the back of the window frames don't have any paint on them. So that should work. I just got to be really careful with it because you don't want to put too much of that MEK that goes and wicks all the way across the window, because then it makes your windows all kind of cloudy. And a little bit of it on a factory like this, having some dirty windows isn't the end of the world, but I don't want too much of that. That's going to be the next thing. I've just got to put all the window glass in, and again, I'm not going to force you to watch all of it because that's a time-consuming process that, well, once you've seen one, you've seen them all. So the windows are all glued in, and one thing about this kit, in case you didn't notice, is the window glass, plastic, styrene, is kind of opaque, and on some kits they're very clear, and on this one I kind of like it. They're a little bit opaque, and what that means is when you look through these windows you don't totally see everything that's inside, and it kind of suits a building like this because, you know what, if it's a railroad maintenance shop, I don't think the guys are bothering to clean the inside of the windows or the outside of the windows on their workshop very often. And the fact that it's opaque means I don't really need to worry too much about an interior on this. I can just put some lighting inside and make it look interesting. And with these tiny little panes of glass, once you look through the framing and the opaque windows, you're not going to be able to see much inside anyway. So I kind of like that. And for gluing them in, I'll show you with this extra window frame that I have here. This is the one that I ended up popping out when I put it in the wrong spot. The window glass, when you put it on here, is about the size of the outside of this frame. So what that means, it leaves these little tabs sticking out. And what I did with this was I just used the syringe and put a tiny little drop of the MEK on each tab once I had the glass in place. And because this is very watery, it just instantly wicks in. And I mean, just the very tiniest little drop on each one of these little tabs that are sticking out once you've placed the glass in place, and it wicks in and it grabs almost instantly and it's glued in. So just an easy way to get the window glass to stay on those frames once you've got them in there. So if you can see inside, that is what it looks like with the glass in place. So now on to the next step. So I have been painting various parts on sprues, like some of these brackets that hold some overhang kind of roof pieces in place. I've painted the deck for the front for the loading dock. Just painted it with some acrylic paints, mixes of black, brown, gray. Same thing with the roof that kind of goes over the loading dock. This is a roof here that goes at this end. It was just gray plastic, painted it to look a little more grubby. It's going to go down at this end. And put some paint on this tank that goes at the end. Again, a mix of black, gray, brown, just to make it look a little bit dirtier and older. And same thing with the stairs, the concrete blocks. There's some concrete, I assume concrete supports that hold the loading dock in place. So I glued those together and gave them a coat of paint. So I've been doing things like that. Here's some other, these are like rain gutters that go in the front of some of the roof pieces. And been just trying to get all that stuff painted. In this piece over here, there's the I-beams for the hoist and things like that. There's also these little window ledges that go on the front, well, all around the building on the lower windows. And I'm not really crazy about having them, but there's these molds in the brick that if I don't put them on, they're going to look strange. So I'm going to put those on. However, the roof, the original roof that's supposed to be with this is this thing. And it's supposed to have these brick inserts that go in here on both sides. This piece in here, and it's got a bit of a slope to it in both directions. But these holes, they're supposed to have these big fancy skylights here. And to me, that doesn't seem right for a building that's going to be in northern Ontario with 4 feet of snow on the roof all winter. These maintenance guys aren't going to go up there and try to clean the snow off their pretty little skylights. So I think what I'm going to do is change it, simplify it, and I'm just going to make a flat roof in there. So what I'm going to do is not put these in immediately. I don't think I'm going to use these at all. Instead, what I'm going to do is cut some pieces out of this scale lumber I have, put those in there, just get a flat piece of styrene that I can put in there and paint it flat black or some version of black, and then I can add roof details on that. And I think it will look more realistic for the application that I'm using it for. Next thing I'm going to do is cut these pieces, fit those in there, and then after that I'm going to start working on some of the outer details of it, like the loading dock and these awnings. And the reason I want to do that before I put the roof on is because I want to do some illumination in this, and I want lighting inside the building, but I want also to put some lights under things like this roof, and I need the wiring to come up from inside the building to those before I put the roof on. So that's why I'm going to start working on some of these outside details, whatever I can, and I'm probably going to end up having to stop and paint and do things like that. So it's just a matter of getting all of those on there, just following the instructions. And like I said, these instructions are not, there's not a lot of words in them. There's just showing you where these brackets go, what roof goes there, which brackets hold this awning on in that gutter. And so it's just a matter of following these little drawings, and underneath here there's a little I-beam that goes underneath there, and then those supports. So just a matter of looking at the drawings carefully and putting it all together. So I'm going to try working on the deck here and the roof that goes around it after I get these supports for my new roof in place. And then we will see how that looks. So if I can get the roof supports in place and then these decks, I'm going to work on that, and then I'll get back to you to show you how that ends up looking, because you watching me do all of this is going to make this a 4-hour video, and, well, nobody wants that. Okay, so I have put the wood supports in for my roof, and I actually decided to make the roof out of a piece of fairly heavy cardstock with some sandpaper glued to it. I've got it over there with the glue drying. I'm going to paint the sandpaper black to give it look like a kind of a gravel tar roof. Then I can put details on it. But before that, I've got to do the lighting inside. But I've done this little roof awning over the loading dock. I put the loading dock in, painted all that, put the 2 sets of stairs on it. It does have some railings to put on the steps here, which I may or may not put on here still. I also put this little awning canopy over this end. And then in the corners of this thing, there are little holes right there and right there and right there and right there. And what was supposed to go in those holes is some little lights like this, and they're not real lights. So what I'm thinking of doing is for at least these two that are going to be fairly visible from the front of the layout, this one not so much because it's kind of under the canopy here, but at least for these two, I'm thinking of making some lights. And so what I'm going to do is use some little scale lumber and make a piece that fits in there, sticks out a little bit. At least that's the idea. And then I have some of these little hanging LED lights, so I'll put one of those on each of these corners and see how that looks. Run the wires inside. Now on the inside of the building, I'm going to use probably these little tiny little warm white lights, but there's a possibility that I might just use a larger warm white LED inside to light up the building. But I also want to put near one of the windows down here on the floor, near the floor, it's a flickering blue LED. I've done that in my little gas station over there to simulate somebody welding inside and doing something, so it kind of flickers a bluish light. So we'll see how that works. That's kind of the idea. I may end up having to put a little divider in there to make the blue effect more visible so that it doesn't get washed out by the white light in the building. But so hopefully this all works out. First thing I'm going to need to do is basically locate all the lights where I want them to be, get them attached, and then solder all the connections. And then the wiring connector, I'll show that in a bit. The wiring connector will go out through that hole in the floor, and then I can plug it into the layout. So I'm just getting ready to connect all the wiring for the lights in here. So what I've done is I created these little lights on the sides. I just used a little piece of wood and actually used these kind of light fixtures, these little hanging light fixtures, but I glued one onto the end, onto a little piece of wood. You can see one here. Unfortunately, with this one, when I went to cut the wood short, I ended up cutting the wire off somehow as well. So this one is, well, not usable as is, but I made 3 more of them. So I've got one on this corner, one on this corner, one on this corner, and all the wires lead inside. And on these LEDs, the blue is the negative, red is the positive. Those do need to be run through a resistor because the maximum power handling of the LEDs is around 3 volts, and I'm going to be using a 12-volt supply. Additionally, I've put I don't know if you can see it down at the bottom, nothing really fancy, just a LED glued to a piece of wood down there. And these are the power wires for it. Again, red is positive, black is negative. That particular LED is a blue flickering LED that's going to kind of hopefully give me the idea, kind of the impression of some light flashing in this window, especially of somebody welding in there. And I put a little dividing wall down in there to reduce the amount of light bleed from the warm white light that I'm putting in the roof, so that you get a better effect of the blue flickering light in that window. And the main light in the building is just going to be this small warm white. I don't want it to be super bright. It's just going to be this little warm white LED. And this is going to fit in here just below the roof. Again, this one is just a bare LED, so it does require a resistor. And so I'm going to wire a resistor into the negative lead here. I think I can run all 3 of these outside LEDs in series through a single resistor. It should work okay. I will put a resistor in this on its own, and then of course the blue LED. So the incoming power to the building will be through one of these little 2-pin connectors. I've mentioned this on other videos before. If you look at my older lighting videos, all of my buildings are equipped with these little 2-pin LEDs that I bought on Amazon. I think it ends up coming out to like $1 per pair of connectors. And so I put the male connectors on the building, and then the female connectors, these 2 wires will lead to a terminal block that's underneath the layout. And I have terminal blocks in various places on my layout that are all a 12-volt supply that are switched from my control panel. So when I add a building, I just put one of these underneath, run it to the terminal block, and then I can just feed this up through the hole in the layout and plug the building into that. So I'm using that for all of my buildings. At this point, I think my soldering iron should be hot, so I'm just going to start assembling this. And these are some 1K resistors that I have here. And so the first thing will be, I think I'll just attach one to this LED, and I can probably shorten up wire cutters and strippers here. And one thing to do, remember, is don't use your sprue cutters. These have a couple of nicks in them because I went and used them for cutting wire. Don't use them for cutting wire. Just keep them for cutting soft things like plastic and maybe little pieces of wood, so you don't put nicks in your blades. One thing I like to do is to use a very nice hot soldering iron, because it solders it quickly and it melts the solder without taking a lot of time that's going to overheat my resistors or my LEDs or other electronic components. So if you have a soldering iron that doesn't get very hot, it's going to make a lot of things more difficult and actually risk causing more damage to your electronic components. At this point, what I'm doing is just soldering a couple of longer leads to the resistor and to the LED here, so that when I start wiring inside the building, I have something to work with. And these are just some very flexible silicone insulated wires that I'm using. So what I'm doing here is I've taken the blue lead, the negative lead from this front LED here, connected it to the positive lead of this rear LED. Now I'm going to take this negative lead and connect it to the positive lead coming from the front here. Just shortening them up a little bit so it's not too messy. It doesn't really matter because, well, I don't have any real people walking around inside this building to get tangled up in my wiring. And you're not really going to be able to see it through the windows anyway, because as I mentioned, these windows are pretty opaque and the little window panes are very tiny. So then those will need to get some sort of insulation, heat shrink, or tape or something on them. This will be my positive lead for those outside lights. And then the negative is right here from this one. So the negative goes in, the positive goes into this light, goes out the negative to the positive this one, out the negative to the positive this one, and then from the negative to the power supply. So what I'm going to do is I will connect another resistor to here. And if you're doing this, just be careful, because if you're doing this kind of soldering, be careful because the leads on the resistors get hot really fast and you can burn your fingers. On the regular wires, there's a little bit of insulation to protect your fingers, but with the resistors, there's nothing. So I just do that, cut the extra off, and that should be connected there. Now I can connect all of the positive wires together. So what I'm going to do is slide a heat shrink on there. Make sure all my wires are stripped properly. So I'll just slide this heat shrink, and you'll see why I'm doing this. I'm going to slide this through this wire through the heat shrink as well. Assuming it fits, it should. And then I'm just going to slide this heat shrink back down over this connection and heat it up a little bit. And so now what I have is, this is my power feed coming in, and it is connected to the positive wire going to the top LED, and it is also going to the positive wire to my blue flickering LED, and the positive wire that goes to this first LED in this corner. Now, I will do the same kind of thing with the negative. Wrap this in, put the heat shrink down the wire, using a little bit longer length of heat shrink this time. Let's hopefully it pulls over it okay. Yeah. Stayed lined up. Good. And this time I'm actually connecting to the resistor here. Same idea. Again, be careful, because the resistor wire is going to be more likely to burn your fingers than the other wires are. So let's try to do this without touching it. I have some smaller diameter heat shrink to put on these wires. And before I go any farther, I want to just test to make sure my lights are all going to work and that I haven't, messed up the resistors or have a poor connection somewhere. So I'll plug my leads in here. It's my connector, and then I have my set of 12-volt test leads. Let's see what happens. So my light right here is working. Light down here is working. Light right here is working. I have a flickering LED here. And then I have a warm white LED here that's going to light up the inside of the building. So it looks like it's all working, and it's good to plug it all in. So I've positioned the building where I want it here, and I still have some more to do on it, but I need to put it in place before I can kind of assemble the hoist that goes across the tracks, because I have very limited space between these tracks, and I'm actually hoping that I have enough space. But to do that, I needed to get the building placed, and I also needed to drill the hole in the layout to run the wire through so that it sits flat on the layout so that I can make everything else fit. But to get it to this point, once I got all the lighting working inside, put the roof on, and then glued the inside of those brick columns in the corner on and put the caps on. And then for the roof, I added some different details that came with it. I mean, this one vent pipe right here was part of the kit, but I also added a little access door coming up from inside and this other ventilation chimney. Those are all part of a whole big bag I got of detail parts. A lot of them are roof detail parts that I found on eBay quite a while ago. Somebody has a resin printer and does some printing of HO scale detail parts, and I found them to be really good for all kinds of roof details. I've used them for rooftop air conditioners and fans and ventilation pipes and things like that. So I put those up there. I added a little bit of junk, I guess, to the roof. I put a couple of little, I just kind of weathered the roof with some, a mixture of gray and black acrylic paint, just kind of watered it down with some isopropyl alcohol and just kind of smeared it on top of my flat black painted sandpaper, just to add a little bit more variety to it. And I also created a couple of sort of wet patches on the roof using some gloss medium, some artist gloss medium that I put in there and just kind of rubbed it in with the brush before the other paint completely dried. And then I sprinkled on a little bit of green and kind of yellowish ground foam to simulate leaves and moss growing on the roof and things like that. I still need to work on that because I'm not totally happy with how it looks, but it's a start. And then I just put a couple of little skids or pallets up there, one with a barrel on it, kind of simulate somebody was working on the roof at some point, and just left some junk on the roof, which is what a lot of guys in these rail yards are prone to do. You finish the job, but if you don't need to get rid of all the junk, why bother? The outside, the tank had a little platform that goes on it, some detail parts and a ladder and things like that. That all worked out. Just follow the instructions to do that. And then I also did a little bit of weathering on the doors. I don't know how much it shows up in these video shots, but the doors were really kind of clean, shiny red, and same thing with the window frames. And so I just took some, again, artist acrylic paint, just kind of diluted it with some isopropyl alcohol and just dribbled it onto various things to kind of dirty things up a little bit. I mean, really, that's what weathering is. It's kind of a fancy name for dirt. So I did that, and I'm pretty happy with how the building is looking. Only thing that I'm not totally happy with is my little flickering blue light in there is a bit too blue. I think when I did the lighting, I should have left a little more of white, maybe a cool white light bleeding in there. I might go back to it and see if I can add a flickering white light in there to go with the blue one to give a better look, but that's fine for now. It's all working. So at this point, I need to attach there's supposed to be a little beam that comes out here with a stand and then the basically a hoist, chain falls kind of thing. And I just don't know what the distance is going to be like, so that's why I wanted the building to be on here. So I'm going to try to get that to fit in here. That'll be the next step. So I'm kind of going to kind of pre-assemble it on the workbench and then come over here and place it in and see if I have to cut anything to length. I mean, I'm kind of guessing I might have to shorten the I-beam a little bit because of where it fits into the hole in the front of the building. So as you can see, I've got the building positioned here. I did a little more kind of dirty paint on the roof to cut down some of the yellow. Can't see it in this view, I know, but to cut down some of the yellow from my ground foam that I put up there. Painted a couple little storage bins. I don't know if you can see them very well, but they're down in this corner here. A couple of skids or pallets, whatever you want to call them. Painted those up, just threw them on the deck. And I can do a lot more detailing here once I do the ground cover on both sides. I'm thinking of having some rails sitting in here and some old wheels and trucks and stuff on the other side, and just various bits of stuff. But the hoist is now in place, and it has a little chain. Now the both ends of the chain need to be glued on, so at the top I just glued it on, then figured out roughly the length I wanted to hang it just above the platform and glued the hook on the other end. And this hoist is supposed to slide on the I-beam, but it does slide, but it's a very tight fit. Now I found when I had to put the little rollers inside, I put one side on the other side, I couldn't actually get them in without shortening the little pins before you glue them in. You'll see if you're building this kit, see what I mean. I just shortened the pins down to about half of what they were, and then they fit right in. I glued them in. And this frame at the end, it's 2 vertical I-beams, and then there's the bracing on both sides. And all of that I glued together just with MEK, just held them in place carefully, tiny drop of MEK on them, and it bonded them into place. And then I super glued the kind of the feet, the foundations that I had painted earlier onto the bottom. Now this I-beam going into the building, it's a tight fit, so I didn't even glue it in. So right now, if I want to move the building, I can actually pull this right off, so it's not hanging on there getting broken or anything. And I did need to shorten this beam by, you know, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so, just to get it to fit in between these tracks so it doesn't interfere. Otherwise it would have been out too far and interfered with the main line going through here. But overall, I'm happy with the building. I will be doing some more, you know, scenery work around it, and probably adding some people. A lot of my scenes need people, and I have bins of them, but I just haven't done it until I get further along with the scenery. So it needs to have some people here on the platform, some guys working or pretending to be working. Overall, it's kind of filling this little gap and just gives me another old looking building in the yard, and I think it will blend into the scenery more once I put more scenery in. Like I said, put some ground cover in here and put some pieces of equipment and things like that on both sides, so it looks like it has a purpose and belongs there, not just a isolated building on the middle of the plywood. But now that I know that it fits, I can also ballast this track, and kind of didn't want to do that before. In fact, I had to dig out a little bit of the ballast in the cork roadbed right here to get these feet to sit in flat. But overall, very happy with how it looks. And as always, thank you for watching. And if you haven't subscribed and you want to see more of what I'm doing, please subscribe. And sorry about the video being so long, but I tried to include as much detail as I could. And so, anyway, see you next time.